going to start recording now. So again, welcome everyone. And I will do a brief introduction for each of our three speakers today. If any questions come up as you are listening to the speakers, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will be sure to circle back and take some time at the end of the program to answer them as well. So it is my pleasure to introduce our panel for today. I'd like to welcome Kristen Tullo, who is the director of the Pennsylvania chapter of the Humane Society of the United States. Grace Kelly Herbert, who is the founder of Finding Shelter Animal Rescue, and our very own Tamar Paltin, who is an assistant professor of animal center management at Harcum. But before she joined Harcum, she ran the program called New Leash on Life of USA, which worked with training dogs with people who are incarcerated. So we're going to be hearing from all three of them today. We'll begin with Kristen. I'm going to step back and sort of, try to manage our chat and the waiting room and questions as well. But Kristen, it's my pleasure to turn the program over to you. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. It's really nice to have this opportunity to connect with you virtually, and I think this photo kind of describes it all, what we've been doing recently. And so I was going to start with a brief overview of our organization for those of you who aren't familiar. But before we get to that, I did want to say, New Leash for Life and Finding Shelter Animal Rescue are two of my very favorite organizations in our state. And so I can't wait to hear from Tamar and Grace as well. So a little bit, though, about our organization, the Humane Society of the United States. I wanted to share one of my favorite things about working for our organization is our logo. If you can see there, that's a sampling of 19 different animals representing the different species that we work to protect. And one of the components of our organization is our animal rescue team, which has an animal crimes branch. And we're really focused on developing relationships that would facilitate a preventative approach to protecting people and pets. And we're really grateful to Harcum College for this opportunity to talk with you today about our work around that. So what to expect from the presentation today. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll cover retracing our history of just Pennsylvania's movement in animal welfare and how we've really forged amazing relationships with human protection organizations that's developed into the Keystone Link Coalition. I'll talk a little bit about real life examples that demonstrate the link. And I do want to say this was probably one of the hardest pieces to talk about because it wasn't difficult to find cases that are happening on the link between animal and human maltreatment. And so I'll cover just three of those cases, recent cases. The third, I'm going to talk about three case examples that are helping to elevate awareness about the link. And then I'll close with pending legislation. Some of you who might know me, I always have a call to action. So I'll talk about ways we can all be empowered to take action, and then want to hear from you, your ideas, your questions, and we'll get started. So many of you are aware of the story of Mary Ellen Wilson. But for those of you who may not be, she was the victim of the first widely recognized child abuse case. And she was abused and neglected, but laws did not, there were no child protection laws at that time. But ironically, this was in the 1800s, animal abuse laws did exist. And so officials turned to Henry Berg, who was the founder of the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And he argued that Mary Ellen was a member of the animal kingdom and deserved protection from the state. Within 48 hours, a successful investigation was launched, and Berg became a co-founder of the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. The reason I share this is that this story is compelling because it illustrates that even at that time, people understood the high correlation between animal abuse and other violent crimes. And moving forward to today, just in 2016, the FBI started tracking animal cruelty crimes in their own category. So prior to that, animal cruelty crimes were just lumped together in this other category, and now they're broken into 4 areas. The first is animal neglect. The second is intentional abuse and torture. I'm going to pause there for a second before I go on to number 3, because the PACT Act is known as the Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act. That was just signed into law in November of 2019, and it's the first federal anti-cruelty statute that we have, and that complements the cruelty laws in all 50 states. And the reason I wanted to mention that, not only is that federal, but US Senator Pat Toomey led that effort, and the majority of Pennsylvania's congressional delegation was signed on to that as a co-sponsor. So that component, intentional abuse and torture, we have better protections in place now. Third is animal sexual assault. And fourth is organized animal events like rooster and dog fighting. I think the other important thing to mention here is that as we're moving forward, states are starting to become implemented in a national database that's reporting their issues on the link between these abuses and in particular animal abuse, so that it'll go into a database and it will give us an extra tool to protect victims from abuse. So that's something that's being worked on as well right now. And I think that was just important to note here. So there are a lot of studies out there for today's purposes. I'm covering 3 examples. And the first, I think, is so important because witnessing animal abuse, really, it shows here that you would be 8 times more likely to become a perpetrator in a violent crime. And the reason this is so important is that because that witnessing leads to more heinous acts of cruelty, it's important that we're intervening if we see those actions. So if someone's attempting to harm an animal or witnessing that abuse, it's important to get that individual, the animal, the family, whoever in that situation, the help they need, because that means that we can potentially prevent future violent crimes against humans. So it's just another example of how this is correlated. The second study here is called the Chicago study. And the reason that I include this one is that it's very comprehensive. So a lot of times you'll see a study that's on the link between animal abuse and child abuse, or the link between animal abuse and domestic violence. But in this situation, they were looking at offenders' past records who had committed crimes against animals. And this shows that these offenses went on from starting with animal cruelty, went on to other offenses that were anything from battery related offenses to sex crimes to homicide. Again, just demonstrating that these issues are relevant to one another. And the third study that I just wanted to recap today before we highlight 3 case examples in the state is sexual assault in the link. And this, if you look at the red, the highlighted red here, 90%, so 9 out of 10 sex offenders, that is 90%, who were flagged for sexual abuse of animals were entered into a mandated counseling program. It is the single largest predictor of animal abuse that someone would go on to a violent crime of child sexual abuse. So this next case that I'm going to share, it's heartbreaking. So I do want to also mention there's one slide that will have a photo that's graphic, but I think it's important to show because it is reflective of what's truly happening in our state. And these case examples are difficult, but they're important to cover. So this first example is on the link between animal abuse and child sexual abuse. And this was right here in Pennsylvania. This child was a victim of child sexual abuse. The boy was brought to a perpetrator's house to perform a sexual act. The perpetrators had discussed their mutual attraction to young boys and dogs, and this was an indicator of the link between animal abuse and child sexual abuse. we did a presentation just a few years ago that it was to all 555 magisterial district judges in our state. And the the MDJ that was on this case, that was in the course, actually, this was one of their cases. And she talked about the impact that this had on her, and really recognizing the need to take animal abuse crimes seriously. So that's one of the case examples that I wanted to cover today. The second case here, and Kathleen Palm, who is she's the founder for the Center for Children's Justice. Kathy unfortunately had a family emergency come up today. Usually we co-present on this topic. So this was one of the letters to the editor that we actually wrote on the link between animal abuse and child abuse together. This was after many of you may have heard about the murder of the 2-year-old Mikkel Fetterman, who was in Western Pennsylvania. This was just during the COVID pandemic, so it's a very recent case. And I think what's most important to demonstrate here is in that blue box that the district attorney who was working on this case also filed animal cruelty and neglect charges. The hard reality of this situation is that the animal was being abused, and we question if someone had caught on or noticed that abuse and were able to call and get someone out there to check on the animal, would we have been able to prevent the death of Mikkel in that situation? Because oftentimes a humane law enforcement officer is going to have access to the home. So at this point, we want to honor Mikkel by really focusing on making animal control officers and humane police officers required to report suspected animal abuse. We also want to ensure that professionals investigating the abuse of a child would report maltreatment of an animal. So that cross-reporting is critical and something we're focused on from a legislative change in the state right now. And then requiring all people who work with children or animals to focus on trainings like this that center around the link. And there's another bill that we're working on that I'll cover at the end that is focused on that training component. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at the very end of this part of the presentation. And then the final thing I want to say about this slide is that we know that after Pennsylvania lawmakers enacted our largest animal abuse statute overhaul, which I'll also cover on the next 2 slides or so, there have been more than 20,000 animal cruelty offenses that have been filed in our state. What we don't know is how many of those individuals who abused an animal also hurt a child or had a domestic violence situation. So that is another area that we notice a gap that we need to figure out how we can capture that data. And that is that's all about that slide. And this is the hard. I should have warned you. In the beginning, I did say there was one slide. I won't stay on this slide too long, but this is Biscuit. And this is an example of a link to abuse in families. And this photo, again, is very difficult to look at, but it does demonstrate the need to take these cases seriously. Biscuit was the victim of a domestic violence dispute. The perpetrator broke his jaw and put 14 cigarettes out across his body. The Anna shelter in Erie, Pennsylvania took Biscuit in, and their executive director was so moved by this story and what happened with Biscuit that she ended up adopting him. Biscuit also became the face for mandatory forfeiture, requiring anyone in our state who's convicted of animal abuse to forfeit that animal to an animal shelter upon a misdemeanor or felony conviction. And so I wanted to highlight this because oftentimes people will use the animal to control their victim. And this is exactly what happened with Biscuit's case. It is important to mention Biscuit is doing well now and living a healthy, happy life. And then the final case that I wanted to cover is the link between animal abuse and domestic violence. This is again a case right here in Pennsylvania. And this highlights a component of the animal abuse statute overhaul as well, which is that veterinarians in our state now have immunity to report animal cruelty in good faith without the fear of being sued or their practice being sued. So this woman had suspected her dog was being abused, and then physical damages became apparent, and she took her dog to the vet, and the vet had determined that this was significant long-term abuse that had been going on. And in the woman's testimony, she said, in the end, I guess Rocky saved us. In a way, he took the beatings that were meant for me and my children. Too many animals and too many individuals suffer at the hands of abusers, and it is critical that we come together to intervene at these stages of abuse, again, to get the animals and the family and the individuals the help that they need. But this testimony really was powerful, and I wanted to share that with you. I'm going to now be a little more on the happy side of this, because that's a lot to take in. This is really a powerful time in our state's history, because it shows that pause and laws matter. And many of you would be familiar with Libre's law, the animal abuse statute overhaul. This was the most significant legislation passed in our state history. And because of how we advocated for the bill, I wanted to highlight just two things. So first, Libre's law is not limited to dogs and cats. They include all animals. So this means that our cruelty statute is no longer species specific, it's act-based. So what's important about that for today's purposes, animals can be used to control, abusers will use any animal to control their victim. That could be a farm animal, it could be equine, it could be a dog, a cat, a bird, etc. And so that's what's really important about this, that we now have a act-based cruelty statute. The second thing here is that Libre's law increased penalties for egregious acts of cruelty, meaning causing serious bodily or injury or death means that felony charges could be filed in our state. Those are the two things that I wanted to highlight out of this significant statute overhaul for the purposes of today. So now abusers are held accountable for their crimes against their victims. And by the way, that was Libre's his paw print is on the bill. And I think that was just the cutest thing. He was at the bill signing. And of course, the one time in my life when I get to be at a bill signing like this, and I look like a big dork in that photo, but at least I have it. So by protecting one, we know that we can protect both. And moving forward over the course of Libre's law being signed into law, we have partnered with humane organizations. You can see the logos at the bottom of the slide. I also want to say, I know that Phil Arcal with the Link Coalition is also on this call today. And the National Link Coalition is a great resource. I'm going to put in the chat a link to their webpage, who has really been also helping to guide us in how we're formulating this coalition in our state. We were able to enact trainings through the Minor Judiciary Education Board. Teresa Olson is also on this call today, and Teresa helped connect us to the EMS for Children program to do a presentation on the signs to look for reporting animal abuse and child abuse. And also Humane Pennsylvania is a great resource for you in our state on the animal welfare side. So it's really exciting to see these groups coming together to protect people and pets. And then finally, emerging issues during COVID. We know that that there were major concerns with children being in the home, or people who might be in a situation of domestic violence, or animals who are being abused during COVID because people were at home, and still today. So we held a Link Coalition collaborative panel that focused on this topic, and that has led into the Keystone Link Coalition. And this is all of these organizations at the bottom, I mean, have come together to say, we're going to focus on public awareness and engagement. We're going to focus on education and training, and we're going to advocate for strong policies and practice that help prevent these issues to begin with. As far as the organizational structure, our founder is the Center for Children's Justice, Kathy Palm, who I wish could be here today. Amy Konis is the president of the Federated Humane Societies of Pennsylvania and the executive director of Humane Society of Harrisburg area. And at the legislative chair, I'm so excited to be a part of that. That's a real passion of mine. And then Grace Coleman's with Crisis Center North, a domestic violence focused organization. And then Danny is with Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and she's helping with trainings. So we should have a webinar coming up in June, and I'll make sure that we get some more information out to you about that. And again, I did want to say Teresa Olson is also on the call, who's a part of our organizational structure, and Phil Arkhow helping to guide us, and Nancy Blaney with the Animal Welfare Institute as well. And you can see that logo there. I'm wrapping up with pending legislation. There are 3 bills to keep an eye out for here. The first is the Protection from Abuse Act. This is a great bipartisan bill. Representative Christina Sappi and Natalie Mihalik have introduced, they're circulating a co-sponsorship memo. And so at this point, this is going to have an explicit bill, an explicit component of the law that says include pets in protection from abuse orders. So right now it's kind of a, you can do that, but it's not explicit. And we need that to be very clear in the law. The second is the Animal Welfare Act, which we have a House and a Senate bill. What's really important about this is there's a training component, and the link training element would be a part of that legislation. And then finally, cross-reporting legislation, which would be the mandated reporters on human protection organizations and animal welfare organizations, cross-reporting issues they see. Wrapping up with a few resources here, and I'm going to put the link, the National Link Coalition in the chat for you. So the Safe Haven Mapping Project, if someone is in a domestic violence situation and they need protection for their pets, that is the link to go to. It's a national database where you can search, and you can search right here in Pennsylvania, shelters that can help take in pets. And then the National Dog Abuse Prosecution Assistance Program, that's great for prosecutors in our state to have as a resource. And then I think the Libre's Law bench card for prosecutors and the abuse overhaul will be emailed out. And then finally, stay engaged. If you see something, say something. You can report suspected child abuse to this tip line here, and you report animal cruelty to your local humane officer or state or local law enforcement agency. Second thing, I cannot stress enough to stay in touch with your legislators. They can help be an advocate for this cause. So letting them know that these issues are important to you and they can help be a champion for moving these issues forward in our state. And then finally, ahead of things, collaborate and partner with like-minded organizations. You never know when, these relationships are going to really intersect. And so building those ahead of time are really important. And then any questions, that's Kathy and my contact information. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you about this issue today.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I also would really like to say a huge thank you to those of you who are in the audience. I know Kristen mentioned Phil and Teresa and Nancy. I have not had a chance to meet all of you in person, but I'm obviously familiar with your organizations and your work. And I'm really honored that you joined us here today as well. As Kristen mentioned at the end of her presentation, collaboration and partnership is the way we spread education about these issues. And I know that I and Tamar and Naisha are always impressing upon our students the importance of education. It's the most effective way of getting the message out on all of these very important issues. So again, thank you so much, Kristen. I will save questions for the end so we have time to get to Grace and Tamar. If you do have questions now, please put them in the chat. At the nationallinkcoalition.org link has been posted. Thank you for putting that in there, Phil, as well. So Grace, I'm going to move to you at this point. Again, Grace Kelly Herbert is the founder, excuse me, of the Finding Shelter Animal Rescue. She wears many hats, but I'll turn the program over to her because she will have the strongest voice to explain everything that she's working on as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Grace.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I have to say that Kristen is a tough act to follow. She is our fearless leader with everything animal welfare in Pennsylvania, and we are so lucky and so proud to have her leading the way through HSUS. And we are very excited for baby Tullo. I can't wait, but I'm happy you're here today, Kristen. So again, my name is Grace, and I'm the co-founder and president of Finding Shelter Animal Rescue. I do have a little bit of a helper here with me today. Her name is Sarah. Oh, she's on a blanket on my lap. So she is full grown. She's a 3-year-old Chihuahua. I rescued her directly out of a puppy mill, and I'll tell you her story in a little bit. But I have been rescuing puppy mill dogs in Pennsylvania directly from the source for about 11 years now. Can you see my screen? Can you see it? Okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay. That sketch there is of Victoria. This little dog is Sprout. He was the inspiration behind our rescue. He was blind and he had severe hydrocephalus. And so in 2010, 2010, we started our rescue because we were inspired to help other animals like him. But Sweet Pea was our first puppy mill rescue. We got her in April of 2010. She was a Chihuahua mix. Her puppies were being sold as purebred Chihuahuas. She bred for 9.5 years and produced 18 litters in that time, with a severe heart murmur, with a gigantic hernia. She had all kinds of physical issues, but the emotional scars that she carried with her through life were pretty overwhelming. She was very shy. She eventually warmed up to us, but she was the one who really catapulted us into puppy mill rescue. So HSUS determines that there are about 10,000 estimated puppy mills in the United States. Nobody has an actual accurate number on that because there are so many that are unlicensed and illegal and operating behind the scenes. And I think when new numbers come out, that could potentially even go up because the pandemic and the pandemic puppy craze has really boosted puppy producing numbers. So legal, licensed, and inspected kennels. You can see here, these are examples of puppy mills. These are not reputable breeders. These are puppy mills. These are pictures that I took myself. So you can see where there are multiple breeds. They do internet sales. So somebody may not know that their dogs are living in a modified shed. They may or may not run loose on the farm and still breed, but still aren't getting the medical attention that they need. So for the sake of doing some quick math, it is not uncommon for me to go to a farm where there will be 25 productive females. They breed those females at every heat cycle. And let's say we do a low estimate of 5 puppies per litter, because usually what they want is the most amount of puppies for the most amount of money. Let's say the average sale price is $1,000 per puppy. And when I first created this presentation a couple years ago, I presented this and somebody said, "Are you kidding me? $1,000 per puppy over the internet? That's crazy." I actually just went to a puppy mill earlier this year, and they told me that For 2019, their sales had gone up to the cost of $1,500 per puppy. And mind you, I was rescuing a blind mother with a genetic eye disease and her blind puppy, but the rest of her puppies looked okay. So they had them for sale. Because of the pandemic puppy craze, the price of his puppies went up to $3,295 each. So this $1,000 average price for easy math is now probably a low estimate. But that one farm with those 25 dogs could make $250,000 a year for dogs who are living in the kind of conditions that I showed you before. So these are the unlicensed and illegal puppy mills. So that golden retriever over to the left, she has lived in that shed for about 6 years. They still have not released her to us. Up at the top is a puppy mill that is unlicensed. They have been reported, and because they are providing the minimum that Pennsylvania requires, so rabies shots and partial solid flooring, and they are getting health certificates and puppy checks, for their dogs before they sell them. They didn't require a license because they were under the 25. And you need, in order to have a kennel license in Pennsylvania, you need 26 or more dogs that you house, you breed, you sell, you transfer. That's the same for breeders and for rescues. You can see the lumber up there where they are building onto their kennels so they can triple the size of their kennel, and then eventually will need a kennel license. And the dog down at the bottom, she is what they call a silver lab. So, that's a new color that they've introduced into the line of Labrador retrievers that people think are some exotic breed. They are not. It's just the color of a dog. And they are fetching a lot of money. But these unlicensed and illegal kennels, they do multiple breeds as well. They do internet sales, and a lot of them remove transparency. So they sell to a dealer who will then sell to a pet store. So you have two layers from the consumer who goes into the pet store or purchases from the internet from a third party, and then you have that dealer who's that in between. So you are 2 steps away from the parents of those puppies, and you'll never see what's in the photos here. So one thing is, don't buy the lie. So when you go online and you see all of these cute little posed pictures that are to the left, to the right, you have the actual dog. So this puppy was living in filth and had skin issues, and the litter mate that we took had severe skin issues. We had actually rescued a dog from there before who had neurological problems from the same parents. We asked for the parents for years. Unfortunately, the mother did not live long enough to be rescued. She passed away in their kennel from heat stroke a couple of years ago. But the name, which is auto generated through the third party marketer or the third party seller, this one is through greenfieldpuppies.com. It's a typical online sales. And when you go to these websites and you see all these readily available puppies for, the click of a button, just available now, you click on it and you buy, that is quite often a puppy mill. No good breeder would ever just sell their dogs like they're selling them through Amazon almost. So this slide is a success story. Olivia lived in a shed. I almost took this slide out because Olivia actually passed away a couple of weeks ago. But the reason I left it in as a success story is because she lived in that kennel for about 4 years producing. She wound up getting adopted. I think you have to go some to find a dog who is as loved and treasured and well cared for as Olivia was after she was adopted through Finding Shelter. She had the most wonderful family, and up until the very, very end, treating her cancer and doing everything for her. She lived an amazing life after her rescue, and she was an incredible companion. Another success story is Violet. Violet The picture to the left is when we actually took her from the farm. She was not supposed to be surrendered to us. We went for another dog, but she was in such terrible condition with infected eyes and infected skin, and was vomiting in front of us when we got there, that we actually talked them into taking the dog, because we had Libre's law. And we said, well, you could either surrender her to us, or we can have humane law enforcement come back and pay you a visit with Pennsylvania dog law. And they did not want, this particular farm was Amish. They did not want the government coming back. And so they surrendered her to us on the spot, and she is living an amazing life. But because we had Libre's law in place, we were able to negotiate her surrender. And I will mention that we never pay for dogs. These have to be surrenders without payment, because we do not want to become customers. And once you start paying for dogs to release them, then you're no longer a rescuer, you're a customer. So Victoria, we rescued her in 2017, and she was very shy, very shut down. The picture to the left is when she was leaving the farm. She was growly, and the man who surrendered her to us was very concerned that she may snap at us. So we had him put a basket muzzle on her, and we had to carry her into the vet. The man in the middle is Peter Egan. He is an actor who has been in Downton Abbey. He's recently been in Afterlife with Ricky Gervais. He came in to he came to Pennsylvania to do a special event with us, and we went on a puppy mill rescue mission together, and we picked up Victoria that day. So she was extremely scared, but in time she started to turn around. But if you look at her nails, you look at the condition of her, she was covered in fleas. She was still able to walk at that point. She was diagnosed with something called degenerative myelopathy. And so she produced a confirmed 150 minimum puppies while she was on the farm. And since it's a genetic condition, it can be passed down to all of the puppies that she produced. We don't know how many of those puppies also became breeder themselves. So then there's another generation of potential dogs with degenerative myelopathy. But we started the V for Victoria campaign to do a fun bucket list for her, to educate people about puppy mills. So we documented all of the fun things that she could have done during those 10 years that she was on the farm producing those 150 puppies, 150 plus puppies. And we started to teach people, you know, what do these animals miss while they're in puppy mills? And so that was her first Christmas, and that was her first visit to the Capitol. She also met the governor. She was on John DeBella's show. She was a therapy dog for a day, an honorary police dog. She led an Eagles pep rally right before the Super Bowl win. She went to the beach. And she also had a special parade with the Norristown Fire Department where they actually drove us through the town, and we were able to teach all of those children who went out there about puppy mills, just through the celebration of her life. So we do it for the animals. We do it to educate. We are making progress. I think it is slow progress because I am a little bit impatient. I think Victoria's law should have passed years ago, but our elected officials are listening. They're taking action, as you saw from Libre's law and through what Kristen presented with the other proposed legislation. Animals are, you know, they are important to our legislators, so keeping in contact with them is important. And so what can we do? Educate people. Tell them what you learned today. Show them things that we have posted on the Finding Shelter Animal Rescue social media pages like Facebook and Twitter. Teach people what it means to learn about puppy mills and to not become a customer of puppy mills. To rescue when you can. You know, I'm always going to promote rescue first. If you absolutely positively cannot rescue, there are ways to find good, decent breeders, and to vote for elected officials who care about animals. But another resource is Humane PA, humanepA.org, which is one of my favorite organizations. Kristen mentioned them as well. And So brings us to Victoria's Law itself. And it's Senate Bill 234. It has been previously introduced 2 times, once in 2019, or pardon me, it was introduced in 2019. My numbers are a little bit off. I was doing this. I was updating my slide late last night. So it was introduced twice before. Let's go with that. Senate Bill 1154 and then Senate Bill 44. Now we're at Senate Bill 234. It prohibits the sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits in pet stores. The 2 prime sponsors are Senator Kristen Phillips Hill, who was a Republican from York, and Senator Lisa Buscola, who is a Democrat from Allentown. It's very important that having bipartisan co-sponsors, so we have 25 of them for Victoria's Law. It's so important to move a bill forward when you have that kind of investment, really, and and the time and the concern of these co-sponsors from both parties. So it was referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee in February of 2021. It was there previously without action, but it is awaiting consideration again. So what you can do is as soon as we're done today, contact your state senator and tell them that you want them to support Senate Bill 234. If they are already listed as a co-sponsor, and they will be able to tell you, you can thank them for that. If they aren't, please ask them to sign on as a co-sponsor. We're still accepting co-sponsors at this time. But this has been years in the making because there is a lot of opposition to the bill in the form of trade groups who profit off of animals, and people who have a financial interest in keeping puppy mills alive. So where we are mission driven, we care about the animals first. There is no profit that is gained by us getting Victoria's Law passed. There are other people who would lose money if Pennsylvania was able to pass Victoria's Law, and for good reason. They should lose that money. They are exploiting these animals, and they are really suffering in the process. You can report fraud, and there's my little Sarah. That was her a couple years ago with the Attorney General. And here you go. There you go. Look at you. Your face is getting a little whiter. The pet scams line is through the Attorney General's office, so that if somebody realizes that they are a victim of fraud when they purchase an animal, they can report there. And I can answer any questions at the end, but that's my contact information. And I hope that this is a lot of information that I threw at you very quickly, but I hope that you will visit our Facebook page. Has most of the stuff, and Twitter has a lot of stuff about puppy mills. We are rescuing them all the time. And actually this morning, right before we started, I was texting about 3 more dogs who need rescue. So hopefully we will just keep on rescuing and being able to save as many lives until we're able to end puppy mills forever. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. Again, please feel free to put any questions in the chat for Grace as well. Just to give you an idea of our audience, we have students from my animal law class. We have students from Tamar's animal center management class who are attending here today. We also have criminal justice majors and also students who are in a domestic violence class and also juvenile delinquency and justice. And the main reason that I mention that is because I am appealing to them to please reach out to our speakers today. I really believe you will find some really interesting opportunities that will, for volunteerism, for advocacy, that will lend themselves well to all of your chosen majors during your time at Hercom as well. And I'll be sure I and Naisha Maza, who is like I said, my partner in crime, the director of the criminal justice program for our partnership sites, will be sure to make sure this information gets disseminated to all of the students as well. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our last speaker, who is Hercom College's Tamar Paltin. She joined us about a year or 2 ago on the faculty, not much after I did, and she worked with New Leash on Life USA before she was a member of our faculty. So I'd like to turn this over to her. Thank you so much, Tamar, and thanks for bringing your students today as well.
Hey guys, so I'm going to share screen with you, and hopefully you guys can all see that. And give me 1 second. So sorry. There we go. Okay, so thank you for having me, and thank you, Jacqueline. I'm really excited to finally be presenting this. I know we talked about it a lot last year, so it's great to finally be able to share with everybody. So I'm the assistant program director for the Animal Center Management class and program, and I appreciate that some of my students joined us today. I'm going to shift gears a little bit from what others were speaking about, and hopefully it's a little bit more feel good, but I'll keep it nice and short so there's plenty of time for questions for everybody, because there's some really amazing legislation and things going on that I'm sure everybody wants to chat about. So I was the director of dog programs for New Leash on Life USA. I'm currently a contractor and assist them with dog selection and placement and all the amazing work that they are still doing on the dog side of things. But New Leash on Life USA uses the human animal bond to rescue dogs while also reducing recidivism. The criminal law students, I'm sure, are much more familiar with the concept of recidivism, but it's the fact that most people who do leave the criminal justice system end up returning to criminal justice system. So the goals of New Leash is to actually work on both ends of the leash, rescuing dogs and breaking the cycle of reincarceration. So in Philadelphia, which is where our Second Chance program is based, there is the highest per capita incarceration rate of any of the 10 largest US cities. 7 out of every 1,000 citizens in Philadelphia will spend time behind bars. We spend around $50,000 a year on every inmate. And realistically, that's an average. There are inmates who cost far more than that and inmates who cost a little bit less. But overall, there are 36,000 people who move through the Department of Prisons every year, with about 100 people admitted every day. If any of you have ever driven down State Road, you've seen the prison complex. There are multiple buildings. There's a women's prison. There's a children's unit. There's multiple men's prisons. There's programs all along State Road. And that's because of this incredible number of incarcerated individuals. Unfortunately, 6 out of 10 people are reincarcerated within 3 years of release. And this is just in the Philadelphia system. We do compare our statistics directly with them. We have had 2 state prison programs as well, but I want to focus on our Philadelphia program today. So this is one of our amazing graduates while he was incarcerated with one of the dogs he trained. What's really cool is that New Leash actually has a recidivism rate of less than 10%. So with the really high rate of individuals returning to incarceration, we know that our program is successful. We know that it has an impact on the community, and we can prove it with data. And it's really important to see the data, because that's how we know we're actually making a difference. The general Philadelphia prison population has a recidivism rate of that within 1 year of that 33%. And as I said before, in 3 years, it's over 60%. So being under 10% is pretty remarkable. It's one of the best statistics of any recidivism program actually in the country. And we know that it's successful, and we know that it works. So how do we kind of do this? So first of all, we start with kind of thinking about what people leave prison with, what skills they have, what they don't have, what they might need. And what we learned early on in our program, and we're about 10 years in, we've had 26 classes in Philadelphia and 12 classes in other prisons. Most people who leave prison, they do not have any meaningful job experience. Many of them have been incarcerated several times from when they were teenagers through middle or older adults. They have very few resources. They pretty much leave prison with the clothing they came in with, and they're dropped off back in their community. Oftentimes they have food insecurity, housing insecurity. They don't have any employment assistance. And in fact, until the Block the Box bill, many could not be employed because they had to state they'd been previously incarcerated. Many people who leave prison do not have access to easy drug and alcohol counseling, and they don't have really strong connections with the communities that they return to. We've had several incarcerated individuals who have been in prison 12 years, 15 years, 20 years. And by the time they go home, it doesn't feel like home anymore. So they have very little incentive to stay and be successful, and they have very little assistance to be successful. They're basically set up to fail from the minute they leave prison. So what we do is we provide a program that begins inside prison behind the bars. And this includes daily workshops with life skills, financial literacy, self-care, grief counseling, mental health, which is incredibly important. Many individuals in the Philadelphia prison system, unfortunately, are lacking mental health aid, and they are dealing with situations that they really do need assistance with. And then twice a week, which was kind of the fun part of what I used to do and what I still assist with, we actually go into prison and do dog training and animal care classes. So we bring dogs to the prison on day one. They live in prison with their inmates with their inmate handlers for 12 weeks. And in those 12 weeks, those dogs go from literally knowing nothing, and in most cases having quite a bit of bad behavior problems, to passing the American Kennel Club CGC test, bonding with people, learning how to work around other dogs, and they learn how to have, their ears cleaned, their nails trimmed, baths. Meanwhile, their handlers are learning how to do all these really important skills as well, which really gives them a nice foundation in basic animal care and husbandry, and it goes into their career readiness courses. We do have a really amazing graduation ceremony where our inmate handlers get to hand their dog off to their adopters, know that their dogs are going somewhere safe, know that their dogs are going to be loved, and kind of have that bridge from behind bars to knowing their dog is going to be safe outside. So the dogs, this is the most important part of our program, I think, in a lot of ways. The reason we're so successful is because we are using dogs who unfortunately come from really unfortunate circumstances. Unlike the amazing work Grace is doing with puppy mills, our dogs come primarily from high-risk shelter environments. So this was Rufus. Rufus was in a very small cage at Act Philly because all the large dog kennels were full. He couldn't be touched. His skin was raw and inflamed. He was emaciated, and he was scheduled for euthanasia at 6 p.m. At 3 p.m., I was able to get into the shelter and pull Rufus, who was actually quite sweet and loving once he was outside a cage, which very understandable. So Rufus entered our prison program with our supernatural class. All of our classes have a theme. And here he is just a few weeks ago, sleeping on a comfy dog bed, never having to know the concern or fear or pain of being surrendered to a shelter again. We know from just his basic vet exam and his body condition, he was neglected. He had open sores on his knees and elbows. He was actually one of my favorite boys. He was a very good boy, but he now lives with cats. His family has continued to foster other new leash dogs, and he does a really nice job helping those dogs learn nice dog social skills. And he's overall just a wonderful ambassador. But one of the important things that what we do, unlike some prison programs that maybe train service dogs, although we have also done shelter to service, we do not give the inmates a cute little fluffy puppy that comes from a purpose-bred litter from a kennel, and then a year later they hand that puppy back to kennel. We give them dogs who have issues. And we try to make sure that our inmates, and we do have male and female inmates, have a dog they can relate to. It's really hard to come from a poor neighborhood and a lot of, lack of resources and not have anyone to really connect with. So we give them a dog who comes from a poor neighborhood, a lack of resources, who is living behind bars in a shelter. And we pair them with 2 inmates per dog, which helps our participants learn how to work together. It helps our participants learn really important communication and teamwork and care skills. It also helps any participants who have maybe health concerns. They can't lift or carry a heavy dog. Maybe they can't walk a dog in the cold if they have, limb abnormalities or medical issues. So it gives them someone to work with, and it gives them a little bit more support system. And we pair them with these dogs, and for 12 weeks, the transformation from when we first walk into the building with these shelter dogs, they're often covered in scabs. They may have recently had surgery. They may not be eligible for surgery yet. They may not be spayed and neutered. And we have had a few girls go into season in prison because they weren't yet heavy enough to undergo surgery. So that's always been really fun. We've had dogs with mange. We've had dogs who have just had ringworm. We have had dogs with neurological deficits from being abused and they're unable to walk properly. So we bring in dogs who, they look pretty down on their luck. A lot of cases they were time stamped when we pulled them. And in 12 weeks, the transformation and seeing the relationship bloom between the men and the women and their dogs is really powerful. And it really motivates people to change their lives. They get to see the transformation with these dogs, and it really motivates them that second chances are possible and that we support them and we're there for them and we will help them every step of the way, the same way we're there for the dogs. So we make it very clear from the start, we are not just a dog rescue, we're a recidivism program and a dog rescue, and we support both ends of the leash. We're not just about getting the dogs back and forgetting about the inmates who do all the work. And we're not just giving them, new dogs over and over. We actually do get early parole for every participant in our program. They leave the same day their dogs leave. So it's a really powerful partnership that we have with the DA's office and the city of Philadelphia and the judges that we are able to provide that to our participants. So once they leave, the dogs get adopted. We have a 100% adoption rate, and our participants are early paroled, which is a huge incentive for a lot of people to join the program. which is always really funny. People will say, I don't know anything about dogs. I mean, I even like dogs, but I want to get out early. And then halfway through the program, they're like sleeping in bed with the dog and they're feeding the dog, something that they made that they probably shouldn't have. And they're like totally spoiling these dogs. So it's really fun to watch that as well. But once they get out, we know that kind of the journey has just begun for a lot of our participants. So we actually have a pre-release in-prison program, and we couple that with a post-release program. So we do provide 60 days of paid internship at 15 hours a week, along with transportation all of those days, along with ongoing classes, access to a career clothing closet, access to a food pantry, access to mental health, drug and alcohol services. We have recovery plans that we work out with the judges while they're still in prison, so when they get out, they're able to continue their recovery. And we partner with ACT Philly, which is our open intake shelter in the city, PSPCA, Providence Animal Center, and Philly Auto and Parole, and a few other internship sites, so that the skills that they learned in prison, they can use in their internship, start building up a resume, which is really difficult for a lot of people when they first get out of prison, is just to have some sort of job experience. So we provide that in those first 60 days as well. So this is one of our graduating classes. So our statistics right now are we've had over 300 participants. Over 200 of them have earned paid internships. They do need to complete all 12 weeks in prison without any behavior concerns while they're in prison in order to earn a paid internship. We've saved over 200 dogs, and we have 100% of our dogs placed in loving homes. So this was actually that supernatural class on the day of graduation. So you can see these are dogs who were all in shelter. They were all time-stamped or had some kind of behavioral risk, and they're all hanging out loose leashes, just standing near each other, which is a big feat for a lot of shelter dogs. They get used to just living around dogs. We do utilize positive reinforcement, so all of our participants do get to wear fanny packs with toys and treats and all that stuff. So you'll see that they're wearing their blue fanny packs. Okay, so here are some quotes from some of our graduates that I thought were really powerful. I'm not necessarily going to read them all because I want to make sure we have time for questions and answers. I know that everybody has a lot going on, but we have had individuals who, upon leaving our program, are very successful. Actually, the vast majority are very successful. We have less than 10% recidivism. But we've had one who went on and became a master's of social work through Westchester University, and he's now helping others on their recovery journey. We've had several who start their own businesses. We have people who really didn't feel like anyone cared about them until they joined our program. So we have hundreds of quotes over the years, but see, these are some of my favorites. We've helped people go to school. We've helped people start businesses, get jobs. And Jimmy, who got his master's of social work, is actually a huge advocate for the work that we do. He had been in prison several times in his teens and early 20s. So it was a big life changer for him. We do have permanent employment for almost all of our graduates who complete internships. Kevin up in the top corner with the little lab puppy, he's actually a manager at the PSPCA now. He was in our state prison program and was incarcerated from age 14 into his mid-30s. So he spent a large amount of his life in prison and is now he started as a kennel attendant, then he worked his way up to front desk, and now he's actually a manager. We have two of our city's ACOs, animal control officers, Dwayne and Terry. We also have Stephen. So we have 3 ACOs now at ACT Philly who actually had to get special permissions from the court system to be animal control officers, because usually if you have a felony, you can't be any kind of law enforcement, but they have all shown such amazing improvement in their lives that they've gotten special permission and they've become animal control officers. And we have individuals who've actually gone to animal training schools, like this is Chris. He went to Animal Behavior College to learn how to be a dog trainer, and he now runs his own successful dog training company. And that might be, oh, here we go. And Stephen, he's always a happy guy to talk about. So Stephen Morales was incarcerated the majority of his life. I think at 12 is when he first became incarcerated, and he bounced back and forth several times. This is his dog Pavlov, and this is actually what a cell looks like in our prison system. So this is a bunk bed. There's 2 beds. The crate for the dog actually takes up as much room as the bunk beds. And then they all live in this very small space together. So you can see that they bond with their dog very closely. He actually won an award through Jev's Human Services, and he's now lead ACO at ACT Philly. So we have lots of great success stories, but he's one that I really like to share because he's just done so amazingly well with his life. And him and his dog were actually featured on the Dodo 2 years ago. So really fun story for them. And that is where I will end that. And hopefully I left enough time for everybody. I hope.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, good.
Thank you so much, Tamar. And for those of you in the audience who might not have an awareness of what the overall recidivism rate is in the United States, it hovers, depending on the nature of the offense for which someone has been incarcerated, it's usually between 50 and 70%. So for Tamar to be running a program and be involved with a program like New Leash on Life, where our recidivism rates are 10%, is quite astonishing and such a benefit to society, as you've seen as well. So before I give some closing remarks, I would like to open up the floor to any questions that anybody might have, any comments from any of our attendees as well. Again, I'm really honored. I also see, Corporal Michael Spada, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Thank you for joining us as well. And thank you for putting your information in the chat. I'm really overwhelmed by the outpouring of support for this program and the benefit that it will have for our students. So are there any questions, students, participants, any comments, anything?
Well, it's Naisha Maza. I just want to tell Tamara, right? Am I saying it right? Thank you so much for all the work you do. I mean, reentry is my specialty, and it always makes my heart warm up to know that there's organizations out there. And I actually am on the board of Philadelphia Auto and Parole.
Oh, awesome.
There is one question in the chat. Ashley is saying thank you and asking, is there any way to advocate for reptiles and other exotic animals to be added to some of these laws? So I'll open that up to our panelists.
So that's a great question. And I don't know if you saw just this week in Pittsburgh, I'm trying to actually pull up this email. An exotic species ordinance just passed that turtles, crocodiles, and other species, there's a whole ordinance around that. I'm going to put this in the chat, the new article. So we're seeing more communities take local action on that. And so I do think that there'd be an opportunity on a state level as we're seeing more and more of this. I did want to say, as far as outside of reptiles, we do have a bill that would ban traveling animal acts in our state. And that really came about after the Netflix series Tiger King, and people started realizing the issues around big cats and issues like that. So there is a state bill and there's a federal bill for those exotic species as well.
Kristen, just so you know, Ashley is an ACM student. She runs reptile rescue. She's actually a huge advocate for responsible reptile keeping. So I think I know where her question came from.
Ashley, could you connect with me? I'm going to put my email and this article for Pittsburgh in there. I'd love to talk with you about that. I'm going to send this article. Yeah, so Pittsburgh banned reptile ownership. Here you go. I'm going to send it right now in the chat to everyone.
And then the follow-up question is, would the bill that you mentioned limit educational animal shows?
Yes, so there is an exemption for AZA, American Zoological Association accredited zoos. There would be for those purposes.
And Naisha did answer. Videos of this program will be posted online on Harcum's Criminal Justice YouTube channel, so you will be able to watch it again if you joined late or wanted to use it as another resource as well. And we'll be sure to post everybody's contact information. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Yep. An animal is an animal, and they all have a duty standard of care, correct? Excellent program. Thank you. I can only take credit for bringing everybody together. So that goes to all of our speakers, and I agree. If there aren't any further questions, we are nearing the end of our time together. So just in closing, I am again so thankful to everybody for donating their time to be a part of this program this morning. I can't believe it's been a year since we were, rescheduled, and I look forward to the time when we can all be together again. But until that time, I hope that this roundtable has given our audience a sense of all of the different ways that that animal treatment and animal welfare and animal advocacy can relate to criminal justice, from the link between animal abuse and other crimes that we discussed, from the proposed legislation governing puppy mills and Libre's law. Those are all crimes that those are all proposed legislation and laws that carry with them criminal penalties for mistreatment of animals, which, as we've seen today, can happen in so many different ways. To the work that New Leash on Life is doing, bringing animals and people who are incarcerated together to improve all of their lives. There are so many different ways that the way that we treat our animals has an impact on our society. And as you've seen today, we can all work together through education and through outreach to really make these, to really create positive outcomes, which is really my sincere hope. This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I came to Harcum as a student in the veterinary nursing program after practicing law for almost 20 years, and then was tapped to be the director of the criminal justice program as well, and developed this animal law class. And now I'm really devoted to bringing this type of program to the community as well. So thank you all again so much. I really am just blown away by the work that everyone's doing. And also thank you to everybody for attending today. This has been a wonderful, wonderful audience. So that being said, I will say goodbye to everybody. Enjoy the rest of your days. Kristen, we look forward to hearing about your new arrival and everyone who has, good things coming on the horizon. I'm really hoping we're turning a corner here and we'll all be able to be together sooner rather than later. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.